So we are officially 30 days or so out from the next election. And this year, like every year, we're going to be having a lot of first time voters. And a lot of first time voters, especially our young people, may not know what democracy really is all about. So, I feel the responsibility to educate and to inform and try to answer some questions that you may have out there. So, what is democracy? Now, by definition, democracy is a system of government by the entire population, or at least all of the eligible members of state, typically through elected representatives. Now, that's by definition. Some say it's a system where people can change leadership in a peaceful manner. Well, that's debatable, as we see from everything that's going on right now. But to me, democracy, simply plain as a day, is we the people get to have our say, use our voice, and be heard so that we can affect change. Now, voting rights and democracy go hand in hand. Your right to vote is an essential way to ensure we have a well-functioning democracy. It is the most important right in the Constitution and is protected by several amendments. So when you think about why it's important to vote, it's important to know the history of how we got to certain levels of voting. I remember the first time I voted in a presidential election. I couldn't even tell you what the candidates were running on. I was simply voting because my mother told me to, because her mother told her to. So I voted. I recall being, what's the word? Not in awe, but just in shock at how very few people were interested in the elections at that time. And I'm not that old. But to me, I knew that it was an important process, and it's still a huge deal for a lot of people, including myself, especially as I get older and I learned the history behind our democracy, and I feel stronger about voting. Now, the 15th Amendment gave the right to vote to any male, regardless of race, color, or belief. Now, hint, I said it gave the right to vote to any male. Whether or not they had been slaves no longer mattered. As a man, they were free to vote. However, passing that 15th Amendment was a difficult fight. But in 1870, it became official. Now, that was a long, long time ago. The 19th Amendment, notice that the 15th Amendment gave the right to vote to men, not women. So to remedy this, the 19th Amendment was created. This one gave women the right to vote. Now, this didn't come to fruition until 1920. So we're talking about 50 plus years. 50 plus years. 1920 minus 1870 is 50 years. It took a 50-year fight to get women the right to vote. Along with that fight, it took some serious work from all the women who fought for that vote. Sweat and tears. So you look at this pattern where we had women not voting for 50 years, finally getting that opportunity. Prior to 1870, certain males couldn't even vote. So we've made some change. We've made some progress. Now that brings us to the 24th Amendment. And let's be real, not everyone was thrilled when African Americans and women got the right to vote. But for this reason, some states started charging a tax, or what you would call a fee, to be able to vote. That was known as the poll tax. We learned about that in history class. Their hope was that these fees would make it difficult for certain groups of people to vote. Fortunately, these poll taxes were made illegal by the 24th Amendment, and that was in 1964. So we've gone from the 15th Amendment, which says African Americans can vote, male, of course, to the 19th Amendment, which says now women can vote, to the 24th Amendment, which says You can't make me pay to vote. And now we arrive at the 26th Amendment, which became official in 1971, that says you can vote at age 18. So we've talked about a few things that have transpired now. So at one point, African Americans couldn't vote at all, even if you were a male. Then women couldn't vote, whether you were African American or not, or it didn't matter. And then, well, I'm going to charge you to be able to have your voice heard. And now, as long as you're 18 and eligible, you can vote. So the progression that we have made all the way from 1870 to 1964, it's taken, and you can do the math, I think it's something like 86 years if I'm doing it in my head, but we're talking about almost 100 years to make 4 steps in voting. And some people feel like they don't want to vote. Your ancestors, my ancestors, all that time, energy, some people died to get you the right to vote. You have an obligation. Not only is it your right, but you have an obligation to get out and vote. Let your voice be heard. 1964 to this is 2020. That's what, 56 years? So it's not been that long since, young people 18 and older have had the right to vote. So use that right, because someone fought for it for you. Research your candidates and their political parties. Informed voters make informed choices. Make sure you research everything about the person that you feel lines up with your values. Learn about these candidates. Who's got your best interests at heart? Visit their websites. Find out who's on your ballot before you go, so that you can get familiar with these names. Check their records. And make sure you know your polling place. Don't show up at the wrong place. But after all that has gone into getting you that right to vote, whether you are 18, 28, 38, 48, 58, and so on, don't let it pass you by. Every election is an important election. Win or lose, regardless what side you're on, your right to vote should be expressed. You need to be heard. Use your voice. I talk to my children all the time about voting. And, they ask me what I think. But it's not about what I think. It's about what lines up with their values. Being a part of any one particular group, it doesn't matter. You decide who you want to vote for. And, make your vote count. Democracy. How important is democracy? How important is the right to vote? How important is it for you to be heard? A lot of times we say people aren't listening. Well, what are you saying? Instead of next time saying you don't hear me, make sure that your voice is heard. Say it with your vote.